Okay, welcome to Super Aging. We're going to see how we go tonight. A few technical difficulties happening, but nevertheless, let's see how we go. Hopefully I won't be freezing all over the place, rather than just in person, where it's fairly cold at the moment. So today I am going to be asking a few what-if questions around aging. So these are things that I've sort of been pondering over the week. They've just kind of popped up in different ways, and I've kind of gone, interesting. So I'm going to put them out there, see what you think as well, see if it gives you some food for thought, maybe a different way of thinking about things. So once again, welcome, and hopefully you are with me on My Time TV Live. That's where I'm going live, so I can see your comments. Otherwise, if you're on one of the other places, then I will catch up with you if you have any questions or comments as we go through. And as always, if you know of someone who would find this very interesting, please feel free to invite them across using the arrow that should be somewhere down below me. Okay, so my first question has actually come from an audiobook that I'm listening to at the moment. And the question is this: what if aging was a disease? So the book that I've been listening to is called Lifespan by David Sinclair, and he's a researcher in aging. And in the book, he kind of puts forth this idea of aging being a disease, and how would that change things if we looked at it. So at the moment, we see aging as being a natural process that happens over, whatever, 80, 90 years or so on, with, all these figures on how likely you are to get to 80 or 90 or 100 or over 100 at the moment. And because it's a natural process, the diseases that people often suffer for or suffer with as they're aging are just part of that natural process. So he's actually challenging that idea based on some of his research. So it's quite interesting. How would our view of aging and the elderly maybe actually change if it is proven that aging is the disease? So have a think about it. Would we change the way that we're actually living our lives? What kind of impact might it have? So just a little bit of food for thought there, because at the moment we just see it as being a natural process. Is that really the case? Have we actually got the capability to live for, well, I would not dare to say forever, but for much longer than we currently have? And what kind of impact would that have? Is it good to not have that happening? I don't know. All right, so next question that I've actually been pondering, thinking, and so on for a couple of years actually. And this is thinking about, what if your body is listening into you? So I put the question up in my Facebook group a few weeks ago now. Are you listening to your body? Which is always a good question to ask, because our body gives us lots of information. But then we can also twist that question. So what if your body is listening into you? So in the sense that it receives messages and ideas from what's going on in our mind, it does. So are you conscious about what you're actually sending to your body? So this is kind of my passion area. This is around the unconscious mind's response to the things that we think, we believe, we say, the emotions even that we have around stuff. How often do we use phrases that maybe are not helping our body to actually age well, to self-heal, which is part of being able to age well? there's all sorts of fairly common sayings. Now, from my perspective, I used to spend quite a lot of time saying things like, this person, situation, job, whatever, is a pain in the neck. Interestingly enough, suffered for many years with a pain in the neck. And then how many times did I say stuff like, I am sick to death of whatever this situation is or whatever? What kind of message is that giving? Maybe I'm lucky to be alive. I don't know. But it's something to think about. We've got things like, break a leg. Is that giving us, some sort of an instruction? What about hard-hearted or broken-hearted? All of those kinds of things. And there's actually research around the idea of people saying that they're broken-hearted and that actually having an impact on the heart. So it's an interesting thing. Probably what we need to do is think about what we want to pass on to our body as part of our aging process. So what kind of positive things can we say? I mean, I like to say now that I've got such an amazing, robust immune system. And, the fact is that over the last 5 years or so that I've changed my language, I get much less in, infections like colds or whatever than I used to get in the past. So is there, how much power is there maybe? So something to ponder, knowing that your body is listening into you, how can you change what you're actually saying? And how powerful could that be? Like, what sort of instructions are we actually giving out? So, a few things to ponder so far. Now, my third one probably is a little bit of me on my soapbox. So the question is, what if we didn't live in a society where ageism is accepted or ignored or just the norm? Okay, and I've been really noticing a lot around how much we treat aging as an absolutely negative thing. I mean, this kind of, once again, ties in with my first question. What if aging was a disease? Do we treat people who have diseases, as though they're terrible and, horrible or whatever? Do we treat people who are elderly with respect? So some of my thoughts around this came from yet another news report, maybe in the past week, I can't remember how long, it's not that long, of an elderly person in a nursing home being basically dragged around and mistreated, in a way that we wouldn't even want to be treating our pets, let alone a human being. Have we just taken the whole, I suppose, idea of being young and being beautiful and being healthy to such a great extent that we now consider anyone who's not like that to be not worthy of any kind of respect? So how would our society change if we actually said, this is not okay? The people who are elderly in our society deserve to have our respect, deserve to be treated probably better than anyone else because they've lived a long life. They've lived through a whole lot of shit. And is that what we're doing? Or do we just kind of try and shove them behind doors, forget about them? And, to what extent are people dealt with who actually mistreat the elderly? They're I don't know, just food for thought. I find it a little bit frustrating to see so much just language around mistreating people. How have you spoken about someone who's elderly or treated someone who's elderly in a negative way? How can we actually change that? Because that's all part of our language as well. If if we're building up a negative view of aging by how we're treating people now, when we're not, classified as elderly, how are we going to feel when we actually get to being elderly? And the other thing that is worth considering is the fact that people, as they age, who live in a society who show them a lack of respect, tend to have less positive outcomes as they age than those who live in a society that actually show the elderly respect. We're spending a lot of money to keep elderly people healthy and, not dying, basically, I suppose. Would we actually have a better society altogether if we treated them with respect, showed them, that they're an important part of our society, instead of trying to just kind of hide them away because they're not young and perfect? Okay, so there you go. There are my 3 ponderings. So first of all, we've got the what if aging was a disease rather than just a natural process. If you want to find out more about that, the book I mentioned was Lifespan by David Sinclair. So very interesting. Some bits quite scientific, but quite interesting. I'm only partway through it. Hopefully I'll get some more good nuggets as I go through. Second one, how do we react? How do we think? What do we say, knowing that our body is actually receiving the messages of the things that we're thinking, the things that we're feeling, the ways that we're saying and believing stuff? Is there some things that we need to tweak around that? And then the third one, what if we actually created a society that embraced and accepted people as they aged instead of rejecting them? All right, so a little bit of food for thought there. I'm going to basically leave it there. So if you've got any thoughts or any comments, if you're watching the replay, just do #replay. I look forward to seeing what you've got to say about my thoughts. All right, have a great week, and hopefully my internet will be working well enough next week for me to turn up. All right, goodbye.